welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jenn, and today I am joined by the author of a fantastic mystery. It has a great setting and a great protagonist. I am so excited to talk about the book and all of the things that went into writing it. So welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
You absolutely can. First of all, thank you. This is just a delight, and I'm so pleased to be doing it. So my name is Elana Michelson. I'm a retired professor of literature and cultural studies. I am a New York City girl who has absconded to the Hudson Valley. And I still write and I still read and I garden and I try to do my bit to make the world a little bit better. And yeah, that's me. The book is, somebody called it a hippie murder mystery, and I actually think that gets it right. It's Agatha Christie meets the days of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's set in 1978 in a little countercultural village in the Berkshires, and filled with all kinds of wonky characters, and some of them very earnest, and some of them downright silly. And a murder happens that interrupts their little countercultural idyll, and that's the book.
It's such a great read. I'm having so much fun with it. And before we talk about the book itself, I'd love to hear a little bit about your path to writing and the beginning of this project. How did you approach? I guess after you talk about your background a little bit and your path to writing, what was the inception point for the book? Was it a character, a vibe, a time, or a place?
There are two answers to that book because this book was written twice. The first time, I'd been an English major, I'd been a graduate student in literature, and I had been sneaking off to read murder mysteries every time the great literature of the world was just getting a little bit too heavy. And then suddenly I was finished with graduate school. And I realized that I would never have work habits like that again. I would never have the discipline to sit down and force myself to write every day. And if I was going to if I was ever going to write a novel, that was the moment. And if I was ever going to write a novel, it was going to be a murder mystery, because one of the problems with reading the greatest works of literature over and over again for 10, 12 years is that you get humble. I was not going to be able to rewrite the War and Peace or the Brothers Karamazov, and I wasn't going to try. And I thought, okay, a murder mystery. So I plotted it out, sat down, wrote a murder mystery, and I almost got it published. And then I didn't get it published. The deal fell apart, as they say. And it sat in a drawer for the better part of 40 years. I mean, many drawers, because I did move from time to time. But I had this old typewritten copy, because I wrote the thing on a typewriter. So the original inception was just, hey, I got these work habits. I've got this typewriter. I think I have a good story. Let's give it a go. But then about 8 years ago, I pulled it out of the drawer that it was currently living in, and I reread it. And I realized two things. One of them is that I realized that the mystery itself, the plot in the narrow sense of the term, actually held up. That I had done it. I had done well by the reader. The clues were all there. The time frame was there. The red herrings were there. Yes, it's a clue, but I'm going to hide the fact that it's a clue was there. All of that stuff from the classic structure of a mystery actually was there. And the other thing I realized was that even though there were a lot of things that I didn't like about the book, I was glad it hadn't been published. The writing was sophomoric, the characters were juvenile and all of that. But I also realized that rewriting that book, and I ended up rewriting every word, but that there was an interesting story to be told 40 years later. That going back and looking at the counterculture, looking at what was a really rich, interesting time, might be really interesting. It was an interesting time politically and socially and culturally. It was an interesting time to be young. We had such hopes. We were going to change the world. And going back and looking at the ways in which we did brave, admirable things, some of us. We did silly, stupid things, some of us. Usually we did a little bit of both. That would be interesting. And that trying to balance in retrospect the good that we tried to do, the good that we did, the mistakes we made, the ways in which that particular version of idealism didn't pan out. It would be interesting. So I sat down and I rewrote it. And that's the book that now is called Part of the Solution and has now been published.
That is so interesting. Was it during that rewriting that the frame narrative appeared? Because I am going to ask about Jennifer next, but we first meet Jennifer a little bit later in her life, and she's looking back on an earlier time. Is that when that developed, or?
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote the book. I set the book originally in 1978 because I wrote it originally in 1978. And all of a sudden, there was Jennifer who, and I was Jennifer's age then. I'm Jennifer's age now. And so I did frame it where Jennifer and Ford meet up again suddenly by complete coincidence at the beginning of the book. And then you haven't gotten to the end, you tell me, but there's a little bit of rueful reconsideration of who they were and who they were to each other at the end.
I'd love to talk more about Jennifer. First off, obviously, great name. As a Jennifer that was born at the peak of Jennifers, you don't really actually see them all that often anymore. So it was really nice to spend time with one. I'd love to know what went into shaping her as a protagonist, and her relationship to the story. A question I always have for mystery writers is what came first, the crime or the investigator?
Oh, well, that's interesting. Probably neither. I think that the first thing that came was the genre. I knew it was going to be a murder mystery. And the second thing was the setting. I knew I wanted to set it in a little hippie town out in the country. So that came first. And then I created a bunch of characters. Jennifer is the main character, but I had a very good time combining new people I wished I knew together to form the characters. The last thing that came was the actual crime. It's because I had to ask myself, well, here I've created this peace and love, idealistic community. Why would anybody get murdered? This would seem to be this is, I mean, when I said Agatha Christie meets sex, drugs, and rock and roll, this is like St. Mary Mead on literally on acid. So,
Yeah.
so why would there ever be a murder?
I am very curious about Jennifer's relationship to the town that she finds herself in too, which leads to my question about bringing Flanders to life. I'd love to know, it sounds like you had firsthand experience, but if there was sort of further research that you did or reconnecting with people, having conversations, what went into the world building of this time and this place?
Well, I certainly didn't have to do any research. I just had to close my eyes and remember. And the fact that I had the original version of the book was all the help in the world because I didn't, what colors were we painting the walls? What colors were we painting our faces? How did we wear our hair? What were we wearing? What were the posters on the walls? What was the music what was then a record player? I didn't have to research it. I could draw on the original book that I had written so long ago and my memory. I didn't go back and talk to, sadly, not all of the people who became part of the composite of the characters are with us anymore. A few of them are, and one of them is very mad at me about it because he didn't like the way he was represented. And I think that I know at one point in my exchanges, you would talk to me about how you'd asked me about how Jennifer is set in her historical context. And I thought I think you're asking the same thing in a different form now. And I've been thinking about that a lot. The first, we're all embedded in our historical contexts. I think that's part of the point. And not only the point of the book, I think that the ways in which we understand ourselves to be creatures of history is a really important way of understanding the world and understanding ourselves. And Jennifer is very deeply embedded in a world that's more complicated than she actually knows at the time. There are a lot of cultural and historical tensions in the book. There's the counterculture, and then there's the many people, what Nixon called the silent majority of Americans who were alive at the time, who either had nothing to do with the counterculture or deeply disapproved of it. So there is that tension. There's also, Flanders, this mythical little village that I invented for the book, is halfway between Williamstown and North Adams in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And Williamstown is rightly associated with huge kinds of privilege. It's a rich community. It's associated with entitled preppies, and although my stepson went to Williams, it's not just a preppy college at all. It's a wonderful place, but it's very much associated with the haves in the world. Versus North Adams, which even in 1978 was a post-industrial town where, I say at one point in the book, where there are more bars than employers and where people are really struggling. And the central relationship in the book, which is between Jennifer, who's the amateur detective, and Ford, who's the actual detective, he's the police officer who ends up being in charge of the case. Their relationship is very embedded in their very different historical circumstances. Jennifer is a well-educated middle-class New York City girl. She can drop out of graduate school, go off, run a hippie cafe for a few years, and then go back to graduate school. And she's got her academic and her professional path laid out for her. Whereas Ford has had to is a working class kid who has had to make decisions about what to do with his life, where his life is much more constrained than hers is, where there aren't a lot of good options. And so even their relationship itself is very much about a certain kind of historical positionality that has everything to do with things like class and privilege. And the others, the other characters grow up to do the things that people of my generation and their particular kind of social commitments grew up to do. One's an environmental lawyer, one is a professor at an inner city college, one of them is a very, very committed peace activist. For the most part, they came out of an interesting historical time and were able to live lives that were both defined by and transformed by the history that they lived in.
There was something so interesting about reading Jennifer's interactions with her housemates and her fellow sort of counterculture participants. First off, their arguments about philosophy and activism and praxis, are reminded me so much of grad school, and just when you have time for all of these conversations and so much idealism and so little experience of the world yet. And and it was, so set in its time and so specific, yet still felt so universal and like it had things for us. Like for me, it was immensely comforting to be reminded that, there's always been infighting among revolutionaries. We've never we've never gotten it together. So
Yeah, and they have very different perspectives. The argument, for example, between Annie, who's the organic farmer, and Zach, who's the American radical historian, about what's wrong with junk food. Is it that the workers don't get paid well, or is that it leads to hardening of the arteries? And which one do you care about, and which one matters most? So, and so there are a lot of arguments, as you say, within the community, debates. I don't want to call them arguments, debates. And I loved that about them. I loved that they each had a slightly wonky perspective on the world that were very different from each other.
Um, so I have a question about the some more world building-y type stuff. I'm very taken by Cafe Galadriel, and I had a very specific question about whether you were tapping into something that is a kind of a fascination of mine, but the sort of like 70s hippie medievalism, that sort of accompanied a lot of counterculture stuff. There was like the Tolkien revival, as you see
Mhm.
here, the fashions, like so many of the things that you see like Shelley Duvall wearing in like fashion shoots from the 70s are very medieval inspired. Was that something that you were also interested in that you tapped into here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I ended up studying the Victorian novel for my dissertation, but I was a medievalist through most of college and graduate school. So to me, Tolkien was how could I not call the Cafe Galadriel, and there, and the Lady of Shalott is one of the posters on the wall. She's next to the poster of Che Guevara, which was you didn't walk into a room in my world in 1978 without a poster of Che Guevara on the wall. And the tarot cards which are also medieval in origin, to me there's a certain kind of medieval flavor of magic and mystery that did infuse the counterculture in ways that a lot of people didn't know. There was a kind of medievalism then that was a very idealistic one. We were all going to be hobbits, and we were going to save Middle Earth, and with our best friends the elves. There are lots of other kinds of medievalisms. There's a very, very deeply, and I mean this term, literally with a capital F, fascistic. There's a fascist kind of medievalism that is about runes and Nordic mythology and Germanic mythology and the master race and all of that. But the medievalism of the counterculture was much more lighthearted than that, and I loved every minute of it.
Oh, so much fun. It reminded me of since you studied the Middle Ages, you may have been there, but in
Oh, no,
Kalamazoo.
I'm not that old. I'm old enough, but I was
Oh
not
no, no,
alive
no.
during the Middle Ages.
Oh no. No. Um, in a there is a in Kalamazoo, Michigan, near Western Michigan University, there's a pizza place called Bilbo's Pizza. And that is every year where Western Michigan has like the American Medieval History conference par excellence, like the Comic-Con of medieval history, the sort of like, the Walmart it's been called of medieval history. Um, and that was my first encounter with this sort of like, oh, very clearly like this is 70s aesthetics in the color choices, in the materials, in all of the tactile and visual stuff. But it is so medieval too, through this like very idealistic hippie lens, and I think a lot of it was because it is very like agrarian and pastoral, it's sort of like the communal life of the medieval peasant, so
Right, right. And listen, Jennifer's last name is Morgan. I didn't even realize I was naming her for Morgan Le Fay, but I guess I did. I guess I did.
Oh, I love it. Oh, okay. So I have a couple more questions. One is about, and I guess this can relate to the historical context and the cultural context and all that, the soundtrack. There's a lot of music throughout this book, and I love it both as a sort of aesthetic choice and a mood setting thing, and also to do things with the story sometimes, like it features heavily. So can you talk about how you use music and how you went about selecting it? You've already talked a little bit about just like what was there in your memories, but in the literary sort of ways, when you pick what goes where, how did that come about?
It's a really interesting question. I think I know the answer, but it's a really interesting question. The the music is, and you're right, there's a soundtrack. there is always music going on in the background, and it's not just any music. The music is one of the characters in the book. And I mean that in a number of ways. The music is in dialogue with the other characters. What is, if it's in the cafe, Jennifer often puts on a particular record, particular album on the record player or the tape deck, the technology of old, because she's in a particular mood and she decides that album is going to meet her mood. But there are also times where it's much more specific than that, that the lyrics of the song filter through the characters' heads in ways that where they're basically talking to each other. The two songwriters that are most important in that regard in the book are Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen, which, if I say so myself, is not a bad choice if you want really good lyrics. There's a scene, for example, and you may not have gotten to this one yet, where Ford comes to an important realization about his relationship with Jennifer based on the Bob Dylan song that's playing. He hears a particular line in the lyric and he gets it. There's another point where Jennifer has done something pretty scuzzy and is feeling pretty badly about herself. And Leonard Cohen is playing, and she hears him sing the line, when you're not feeling holy, your loneliness says that you've sinned. And she sort of stares down at the tape deck and says something that you probably don't want me to say in the podcast, because, like, he got it.
Yeah.
So there really was, it wasn't just that, that music really was the genre of the counterculture, much more than literature or art. Music was hugely influential, and hugely reflective of what was going on. But more concretely than that, there really is a sense of the characters in dialogue with the music.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it is so interesting to me because that is the way that, I have related to music in my life and that people I know, it really does like become a sort of, it's something that you are in dialogue with over the course of your life. Yeah, it was just really lovely done. I love the choice of Leonard Cohen in particular because there's really no one better at like making your sort of like abjectness seem beautiful,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Can I quote you? That was really
Yes.
well
Yeah.
said.
Absolutely. Um, so my last question is about mystery and how you handle pacing and structure and all that. I'd love to know how you make those choices, particularly in a mystery. Pacing has a lot to do with the rate at which you answer and propose questions. So
Mhm.
how do you structure a mystery and 'cause it's a lot of plates to keep spinning. So what does your drafting process look like and how much does the final product look like where you started?
The first draft of any classic murder mystery, not the ones where a stranger walks in in the last scene and it turns out that's the person who done it. But if it's structured as a classic mystery with all of the clues and the red herrings and all of that, the first draft of a mystery like that is written on a spreadsheet,
Mm.
because you can't start writing the first scene if you don't know exactly what happened, exactly what the time frame is, exactly what the clues are, exactly where you're going to put the clues, exactly how you're going to hide the clues, exactly where you're going to put the red herrings that look like clues but they're not really clues. So in some ways the structure and the time frame and the scene by scene outline of the book gets written first. And it's a very constraining process in some ways. I had to always remember what time it was in this particular book, because time is a major theme in the way the mystery plays out. But once I'd done it, there was it kind of set me free. I think I had just because I was a student of literature for so long, I think I just had an almost intuitive sense of how long a scene should be, how to balance things like the description versus the dialogue and that kind of thing. I think that that kind of flowed. And what I was able to do was, okay, here's this cool scene. Here's a Halloween party. Oh my God, a Halloween party in 1978. Who's, who's doing what? How did they dress? What are the symbolisms of the different costumes? Who's drinking too much of the tequila that's on the table, and who's saying what and who's dancing with whom. I was able to just kind of close my eyes and be in that scene and listen to the characters talk. And I could, one of the things you learn in graduate school is how to touch type. And I could just close my eyes and be in the scene and let my fingers record as I went. I think that's probably true of a lot of mysteries, but it was certainly true of this one because in some ways, and again, this is in very literary terms, but listen, the people who are going to be listening to this are your loyal Syosset readers, so I'm going to assume that they know a little bit of literature. It's a period piece. It's a comedy of manners. And the fact that I had worked out all the hard stuff about the structure and the pacing and the timing beforehand just freed me up to just have a really good time.
That makes so much sense. It's like sort of free verse versus like a sonnet, Like sometimes the
Yeah,
constraints give you a lot of freedom. So oh, well, I have been enjoying this book so much, and this conversation was lovely. I always wrap with the question about what is on your horizon. Are you writing now? And do you think we'll ever see Jennifer again? Or
I think so. I am planning a sequel where Jennifer and Ford are brought together again about 6 months after they meet up by happenstance in the the present day. And there's another murder. I know who gets murdered, by whom and why and how. I know the ways in which although it's a contemporary story, it's very much rooted in the past. And I've promised myself, okay, I'm all right, I'm back to the spreadsheet. I'm back to that piece. I'm going to map it out and then I'm going to start writing. And if it's fun, I'll keep going. And I promised myself that if it's not fun, I'm not going to keep going. But I've carved myself out a month this winter where I'm going to be all by my little lonesome with nothing else to do in a room just right by myself, and I'm going to write. And I hope I very much hope that it is fun, and I very much hope that I actually get to write it. It will be called, if it ever sees the light of day, another rock and roll reference. It's going to be called Roses on Your Grave. Do you know what that's from?
I don't actually.
It's the Rolling Stones.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, I am so excited that that possibility exists. So Godspeed, happy writing, and thank you again for sharing your time and your book with us. It's been lovely.
Thank you so very, very much. This is a total pleasure. And bless you for being a librarian. I really believe that librarians are the unsung heroes of this moment.
Thank you.
You're, out in the trenches, keeping access to information alive, and bless you for it.
Thank you. We're trying. All right, listeners. Here's your homework. Please check out Part of the Solution. It's an absolutely lovely ride. I am enjoying it so much, and I think you will too. It's out now as we speak. It will be available when you hear this. So please head to your favorite independent bookstore or library, wherever you like to go for books. Okay, it is time to close this
And
chapter.
it
I'll see
and
you.
it's also available online.
Oh, yes. Yes. Do you have a favorite place you like to send people for books or?
Yes, bookshop.org.
Oh, excellent.
Because, yeah, bookshop.org, because all of the proceeds go to support the independent bookstores in this country that, like the libraries, are keeping alive our access to information.
Yes, they are our allies in the fight, so we try to send people their way too. So thank you. All right, it is time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.